Hi, everyone. This is the Crime Cafe, your podcasting source of great crime, suspense, and thriller writing. I'm your host, Debbi Mack. Before I bring on my guest, I'll just remind you that the Crime Cafe has 2 ebooks for sale, the 9-book box set and the short story anthology. You can find the buy links for both on my website, debbimack.com, under the Crime Cafe link. You can also get a free copy of either book if you become a Patreon supporter. You'll get that and much more if you support the podcast on Patreon, along with our eternal gratitude for doing so. But first, let me put in a good word for Blueberry Podcasting. I'm a Blueberry affiliate, but that's not the only reason I'm telling you this. I've been using Blueberry Podcasting as my hosting service for my podcast for years, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made. They give great customer service. You're in complete control of your own podcast. You can run it from your own website, and it just takes a lot of the work out of podcasting for me. I find for that reason that it's a company that I can get behind 100% and say, you should try this. Try Blueberry. It doesn't require a long-term contract, and it's just a great company, period. And it also has free technical support by email, video, and phone. So you can get a human being there. Isn't that nice? Hi, everyone. Today's guest is a dual citizen of the U.S. and Switzerland. She's also the author of the Polizei Bern series, featuring 2 detectives, Giuliana Linder and Renzo Donatelli. Her work has been shortlisted for many awards, and she has 2 books out in this series, with a 3rd coming next year, which is coming very quickly. It's my pleasure to have with me today Kim Hayes. Kim, hi, how are you doing?
I'm great, and thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure, believe me, and it must be late there where you are. Switzerland, right?
Yes, I here in Bern, it's 9 o'clock, but
Oh
not
my
too late.
goodness.
I'm still, oh, my eyes are wide awake, so
Still functional at 9. Very good.
exactly.
Good. You have a great website, by the way. I really love all the description of Switzerland you have under the information tab about Bern in Switzerland.
Oh, thank you. I tried to put in a lot of sort of strange and interesting facts, like that the Swiss flag is the only square flag besides the Vatican's flag. Every other flag in the world is rectangular.
Hmm.
This is the sort of thing that nobody knows, and why should they? But it's fun.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's very interesting. Um, so what was it that inspired you to write about the subjects that you picked, which are very topical subjects, by the way, pesticides and child labor?
Yes. Well, and in the third book, I have homophobia as a topic too. So that's
Oh.
certainly, I have a lesbian activist who's killed in a hit and run. But I realize you haven't read that one. I have, of course. So, but I won't go into that. You know, I love to research and I like to learn, as most writers do, as most people do. So I often, I guess I'm lucky that things turn out to be topical, but it often is I decide to put something in a book that I want to learn more about. So I used to write articles here for a Swiss language magazine, and so I had done a short article on organic farmers. And when I started thinking about writing a mystery, um, I already started thinking about, well, I want, what background do I want to give it? And immediately I thought, well, what do I want to research? So I knew that I would like to do more research on organic farming. And then of course I had to think of a reason for an organic farmer to get murdered. So and the second book, which involves a really terrible scandal in Switzerland, child labor, where children were supposedly fostered out, but really placed on farms almost as slaves from a very young age into the late 1960s, early 70s. this was something I saw a museum exhibition on because it was just starting. The scandal was just starting. People were just as late as the early 21st century, people were starting to be aware of it. And once I saw that, I thought it would be something very interesting to talk about. And certainly one could easily imagine how murders or violence might occur as a result of something like that.
Yes, absolutely. That's astonishing, I gotta say. Um, Linda is a really interesting character because she's always like automatically picking up clues as she goes and kind of filing them into her head, which is something I don't see a lot in mystery writing. The way she picks up these little details and kind of narrates them to you. I thought that's an interesting approach to bringing the reader into the mystery solving part of it.
Well, thank you. I'm glad. I mean, obviously, I don't want her to be psychic, so the clues have to be there for us readers. I mean, I'm also a reader as well as a writer, so a mystery reader. The readers want to get the clues, see where the clue is coming from. But it sounds like you're saying that it works. And they are police procedurals, and I think that procedure and process is really interesting to me. In that sense, I think I'm more Swiss than the Swiss, or as Swiss as the Swiss, since I've lived here 35 years. And I think I really want to understand myself. I mean, I want to know how the crime gets solved. And I think that's what people who read police procedurals want to know. They want to see the process.
And
I hope, anyway.
I think police are very attentive to that sort of thing. I think that's the thing. You really are creating sort of like the experience of being a police officer or a detective rather than, a reader as of something that is being solved, if that makes any sense.
Well, good. No, I'm very glad that the person that you felt as a reader that you were able to put yourself into that. I think something that's also important to me because I'm interested in moral dilemmas.
Hmm.
It's in part what I did my dissertation in sociology on was to do with moral dilemmas. So I feel like it to be a police. I'm not a police woman or a police person, but I think you must constantly have moral dilemmas unless you're really not a very thoughtful person. And so I think I want to show how the detectives also have to think and worry even that they might have made a mistake.
Exactly, yeah. There's a lot of thought that goes into it because the consequences are so great,
Exactly.
potentially.
Yeah.
Um, how did you become so familiar with police procedure? Did you contact the police, talk to police officers, do other types of research?
I did contact the police and I have gone to the police station here, the very one. I mean, I give the real address, the real one that I talk about in my books. But I'm incredibly lucky that I live in a little sort of a horseshoe cul-de-sac, and I have a very high-ranking policewoman who's higher up than a homicide detective by now, as a neighbor just across the playground from me.
Oh, how
And
convenient.
it is incredibly convenient. So she reads my manuscripts, and I trust her in that she tells me, look, if there are some small things in here that aren't exactly what we do, it's artistic license. It is fiction. But if you write something that would make any Swiss police person fall over laughing, or that's egregious, that's really wrong, she fixes it for me.
That's
So, I mean,
awesome.
I make them have a much bigger cafeteria in the building than they really have. So in that kind of thing, she doesn't correct me. It doesn't have to be accurate,
Hmm.
but she doesn't let me make mistakes. And I ask her constant questions.
Wow. Well, that's good. That's great that you have somebody there.
So lucky.
That is
Yeah.
fantastic.
And a
What are
very
you?
nice person.
Oh, that's cool. That's always good. Yeah.
Yes.
What are your plans for the series? Do you anticipate writing a lot more books, or do you have plans for it just to continue writing them as they come to you?
You know, it's interesting you should ask me that. The fourth one is already written. The third one is, and of course that sounds impressive, but in fact you have to be ahead, or if you people who try to bring out a book a year, and an incredible number of very good mystery writers do. I mean, this is takes a lot of work, and I'm going to have four, and then I'm going to take a break. So if people will get through number four, and I'm not sure that number five will come out a year later. I shouldn't confess this, but I haven't confessed it to my publisher yet. But I need a little break.
That's
but
understandable.
but I do think, there's a lot more that can be said about, I mean, about this couple of detectives. I mean, they aren't a couple, but as you know, they this is a meta story over the series, which is that the older woman, um, police detective, and her assistant, who's about 12 years younger, and she's in her 40s and he's in his 30s, they are very attracted to each other through working together, and they're both married with kids. So this is a big struggle for them.
I was
And
going to say, yeah, this is a really interesting aspect of the books also that I wanted to get into. What made you choose that particular relationship for them?
well, it's funny because what first most wanted to do was give them both families. I love many police series with a loner detective, and of course there are a lot of them, or detectives with alcohol problems, or whose partners have left them, and because it's so difficult to live with a police man or woman, which I can imagine. But I wanted, um, like Donna Leon's Guido Brunetti. I don't know if you know her series set in Venice. He
Yes,
has a lovely family, and they're very important to him in his life, and in even in his conversations, and when he's solving mysteries. And I wanted my both of my detectives to have families. But sometimes things just develop themselves. I didn't know at the beginning that I was going to do this, but as I had them working together, and I mean, and it's what happens in real life. Two people who work very closely together, whose partners can't quite, in a case of a police, you're not even allowed to really necessarily talk to your partner about what you're doing. Um, they become attracted to each other. So, and of course, as I had a great fun having this younger and, as you know, very attractive man become attracted to my his 12 years older boss. I thought, what do they say? What sauce for the gander is sauce for the goose, or something like that. I figured, this happens to with younger women, so hey.
I found it very believable and
Yeah.
very interesting. I like the relationship. I think it's great.
Oh,
Part of
thank
what
you.
keeps me
I'm very
reading the
glad.
series, along with just the fantastic storytelling.
Thank
Um,
you. I'm so pleased that you enjoyed them.
I do, I do. So you are both a Swiss and US citizen. I thought that was interesting, but you've also lived in Canada and Sweden?
I d Yes, and Sweden, the fact that I started in Sweden and now live in Switzerland, two SWA countries, is a complete coincidence. I didn't just decide I need to get the set. I did a year after I graduated from college, where I actually went and worked for a while in a factory in Sweden, and lived there and traveled there, and I still have good Swedish friends. Um, but that had nothing to do with later meeting my husband, who's a Swiss, um, and actually 4 years younger than I am, not 12, thank goodness. But um, so anyway, as you may know, because I wrote about it on my blog, we met on a park bench in France. So
That's
um,
so cool.
so
But
nothing
you're
to
not
do with
going to
Sweden.
Swahili.
No.
Let's see. I oh, I noticed your bio said that you've held a wide variety of jobs. I have also held a wide variety of jobs. I have a theory about that. I get the feeling that holding a wide variety of jobs tends to inform your writing in various ways, due to the sheer diversity of people you deal with when you take different types of jobs. What are your thoughts on
Yes,
that?
that's
Has your
interesting.
background informed your writing in
I
work
would say
background?
absolutely. I think that living in lots of different countries, and I also grew up in Puerto Rico, although my parents were outsiders. I think the experience of being a foreigner, both in Puerto Rico, even in Canada, because it was during the Vietnam War, and here, it does make you observe in a certain way, and it does also give you a certain distance, which then makes you into an observer. And I think, um, I mean, hopefully not too much of an observer. You know, I lived here 35 years. I feel very Swiss, but and as far as the jobs go, I think also when you change jobs, I mean, if you have to do it too often, it's nerve wracking. But you have to observe to adapt. So I think a lot of it has to do um, with with learning to feel comfortable in different situations. And I somehow think that that informs writing too. That you know you have a distance and yet you can be close as well. Hopefully.
Yes, yeah. Learning to become part of a new community, so to speak.
And yet often never quite belonging, which is
Yeah.
difficult, but at the same time, you know, makes you more of an observer, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Because I've done quite a bit of moving around myself when I was younger, and
Hmm.
it does definitely create a distance of sort from people, but
Yes.
at the same
It,
time, it's not like you don't want to be there or be part of it, but at the same time, you're just sort of like looking at it and going, okay, that's what happens here. I should be
mhm.
doing these things or something
Yes,
like
and
that.
sometimes, let's face it, we're talking about it, you know, like, oh, it's so educational, but sometimes, especially when you're, you know, 13, 14, depending on when you move, it can be extremely difficult, you know,
Yes.
and it also can teach you at some ages, it can teach you something about bullying, which, as you know, is a topic in one of my books. So, you know, you
Yes.
learn a lot of interesting things that can become part of, because, you know, being the outsider isn't always easy.
It is not. But sometimes we need somebody's point of view as an outsider
Yes.
to wake us
Yes.
up to certain things.
Yeah.
Who are your favorite authors?
Well, I I I do read other things besides mysteries very happily. I like science fiction, I like fantasy, I like what gets called literary fiction, although I think plenty of mysteries are literary. Um, I like some romances. So I read a lot of things, but I'll talk about my favorite mystery. I guess I'd rather talk about my favorite mystery writers. Um,
Cool.
One of my favorite mystery writers is Josephine Tey, who is one of goes back to, you know, the 30s, 40s, 50s. And I she is was Scottish but British, and she to me she's somebody who writes about people as I mean her books are novels. They are not thrillers. And I don't think my books are thrillers. I think they have suspense, but they're not thrillers. She focuses very much on the personalities of her characters, the baddies and the goodies. And I think she's great. Another person I like, as I mentioned, is Donna Leon. I think I like her very much, and she's influenced me because she writes about a detective with a family living in a country that where you want to you where the Venice in her case and in my case Bern, they're almost characters in the book. The setting is so important. The setting shapes what happens. And I love Michael Connolly. I mean, he is, to me, if you write police procedurals, Michael Connolly is your god because he's just so brilliant.
He
He's
is
great.
good. He is excellent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Donna Leone, I love her books. I love the Venice setting.
Hmm.
Having been to Venice, it's like, oh, it's like I'm revisiting when I
Yes.
read it.
Yes. And she
Yeah,
describes it so, I mean, I'm no expert, but she seems to describe it so brilliantly.
she
Yeah.
does, and the stories are great. Let's see, what advice would you give to anyone who's interested in writing for a living?
Whew. Um, I guess I should preface that by talking about myself because I was just phenomenally lucky. I did not start trying to write novels. I have written articles freelance, but I could never have supported myself doing that. I did a lot of research for them, and I once figured out that I was probably making, about $5 an hour for the time it took me to research and write my freelance articles. Not a money you can live on, especially not in Switzerland, the most expensive country in the world. Um, I would say, in my case, I didn't start writing till my 50s, and I basically phased out of my job, and my husband supported me. It's that simple. To pretend anything. I mean, why would I pretend? I couldn't have done it. I mean, I ended up writing full time, and I couldn't have done it without someone to support me. But I guess most people don't have that. So I guess what I would say, though, is I would recommend to people if they want to have a career as a writer to get a part-time job that they not and hopefully this is dreaming, but that they really enjoy because it doesn't do you any good to be miserable and bored. Try to find a part-time job, hopefully doing some other kind of writing like proposal writing. I wrote proposals a lot. That I did make money. I mean, funding proposals for nonprofits. But and then, just do the best you can when you aren't at your job, write as much as you can. But the idea that I mean, so few people can support themselves with writing, and certainly not with writing fiction or poetry, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not would never discourage someone from trying, but I just I want to when I think about this, I just want to mention that I knew he's dead, but I knew well a poet, C.K. Williams. He was a good friend of my uncle's who was a Pulitzer Prize winner and he won a National Book Award and he wrote poetry. And I know from my uncle that he, until he was about 60, he got a job teaching writing at Princeton. I bet that he was able to, and he was very successful. But in the early days, first his father supported him, and then his brother. They were both worked for companies. They were in industry. They just happily supported him. It was like the days of the Renaissance when you had a patron. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a very touching story that instead of saying, you know, get off your butt and go get a job and what is this poetry garbage, they both accepted, first the father and then his little brother, that Charlie was going to be a great poet, which he turned out to be, and that they were going to support him.
I think that's wonderful.
Isn't that touching now? How many people are that lucky? But, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Think of all the famous Renaissance painters who had their Medicis to support them.
That's right. Yeah. It's a tough business, that's for sure, in
It's a
terms of
tough business. Yeah.
making money. No matter what anybody out there says, it is a tough
Hmm.
business.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add before we finish up?
Well, I guess I'd like to mention the names of the three books.
Please
Although
do.
I think you did, and I realize that some people are listening to this on a podcast, but I thought for the people who are watching it, I could hold up the books. Can I do
Excellent.
that?
Please do.
Okay. So the first book, which is about the organic farmers, is called Pesticide because obviously organic farmers do not use pesticide. And that is the first one. It's the one with the cabbage on it.
I love that
And the
cover.
second one, I do too. I think it's great. And I have to say, Jennifer Doe is the name of the person who signs my covers, and I think she's brilliant. And the second book, Sons and Brothers, is very much about there's a father, a man in his 70s who is beaten up and drowned at the beginning, and his son is suspected, his estranged son. So it is very much about sons and fathers and brothers, some sisters too. And the third book, which hasn't come out yet, has a bicycle on it because a woman is killed right at the beginning. It's not a spoiler, in a hit and run when she's on her bicycle. So that is how
Aha.
the murder occurs. And at first they don't know it is a murder, but so I have given that away. But you find that out. You figure with my two detectives involved, it's probably
It's
going to become a
probably.
murder.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there they are.
Yeah, a bit of a hint there, a bit of a spoiler. I mean, you're reading a mystery, right?
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much for being here and talking with us about this because your books really are great, and I hope that everyone will check them out.
Thank you. I'm so pleased that you enjoyed them. And of course, I hope people do. That's why you write books. When you're a writer, you want people to be entertained by them.
That's it. Amen to that. So, on that note, I'll just say if you're listening, please leave a review if you enjoyed this episode. And tell all your friends about the podcast and your family and the guy next door and his family. And I'll stop there. So next time, my guest will be Jason Capcola. Until then, happy reading and happy New Year. Hello, 2024. Be seeing you.